everyone. I am Jake Litke. I'll be your host. This is Cannabis Marketing Live. Today we have Ryan Hunter with us, and we are going to talk about brand marketing and the funnel and all of that good stuff. I'm gonna read his bio because it's a little too long for me to memorize. So I'll just read this off, and then I'll ask you some questions about that. So Ryan here has led organizations through transformation and growth across sectors, including cannabis brands, consumer internet, enterprise software, capital markets, nonprofit organizations. That's a lot in there. We'll dig into that. He's developed and launched dozens of products for multinational companies as well as bootstrap startups. He is currently the CRO for Spherex Labs, a Colorado cannabis company. Did I pronounce that right? Is it Spherex?
Yeah, good work, Jake.
All
You
right,
got it.
perfect. And Ryan previously was COO at Willie's Reserve, which is a brand I think everyone is aware of. Led business operations and national distribution. Grew the brand's reach from 2 markets to 8. Prior to Willie's Reserve, Ryan developed a 10-acre cannabis farm as well that led 12 million a year medical cannabis retailer. Well, led a 12 million a year medical cannabis retailer. You currently serve on the board of directors for Redwood Roots Distribution, and you're advisor to Heisman, the cannabis brand from NFL star and Heisman Trophy winner Ricky Williams. Welcome, Ryan.
Thank you so much, Jake. Excited to be here today.
Yeah. So I already have a bunch of questions just about your bio, but let's
Well, good
let's
job pressing through all that.
yeah. Well, you've done a lot. So, but let's set the topic here. We are going to be talking about cannabis marketing and specifically how to build a brand, right? So brand development.
Yeah,
I think that, this is something that I've been saying for a while, and I still think is mostly true, which is that there's still no such thing as a national brand in cannabis. If you go to San Francisco, where I live, and ask someone to name 3 brands, and you go to Florida and ask someone to name 3 brands, they're not going to name the same brands, right?
right.
Uh, Cookies probably has the most notoriety overall because it does a little bit more than just cannabis. But there are no national brands today. At some point, there will be national brands, and I think the question is who's going to get there, and let's talk about how they can get there. So
Sure.
maybe we can start with you can tell us a little bit about Spherex, and maybe your approach to brand development that you're engaging in now.
Yeah, sure. So Spherex has been around since 2015 in the Colorado market. We've had a few different runs at other markets, but today we're just based in Colorado.
Hmm?
We sell vapor cartridge based products, so distillate, a couple different brands. We also have live rosin cartridges as well. And it's a pretty straight path for those kinds of products. And I've been on board now for coming up on a couple of years.
That's great. Now you mentioned live rosin.
Mhm.
Uh, Maybe we could talk about the difference between regular distillate, live rosin,
Sure.
and did you skip live resin and just go to rosin?
Uh, uh, I did not. We don't have a live resin product in the market currently. We have had previously, but we've seen a trend shift really toward the rosin products. Consumers are showing a lot of preference for those. So as we optimize our mix of products and SKUs, that's where we have landed at this time.
And have you found between your distillate and your rosin product, obviously those are different price points, right?
Mhm. Yeah,
What kind of demographics have you discovered, if any, in terms of those two different type of customers? I've fall in the live rosin category. I like the product. I like the concept of it.
sure.
It definitely costs more, and you're talking about I think certainly a connoisseur aspect, but is there also just people that have a bigger wallet tend to buy higher end products? What have you found?
Yeah, that's interesting. We actually have, and I think we may get into this a little bit. We have two different distillate brands that are segmented more around affordability.
Mhm.
Rosin, for us, I think it's more like you were describing. It's sort of a connoisseur grade product. Our pricing strategy across the board is to not to be a middle of the pack as the price point. We try to be so our rosin product. If you think about a bar shelf, you have the well, you have the first shelf, then you have the top shelf. Our rosin products top shelf, but we're competitively priced at that top shelf. So we try to offer value at every tier in that way. And so we work with a one farm here in Colorado that does just a lovely job of cultivating cannabis. They're very intentional about their cultivation methods, their genetics, and then they use ice water based process to produce the rosin. So in terms of the consumer, they tend to value those qualities. I think also the consumption effects that people experience tend to differ from the high you get from consuming distillate versus the high you get from consuming rosin. Definitely more directional based on the cultivar and the terpenes that are preserved in that process. I think people have an appreciation for those. They do generally tend to be higher priced than distillate, but I don't think we really think within that distinction between rosin and distillate as a price point thing. It's more preferences around the consumption effects, the flavor, and this generally the quality.
Okay, great. Just out of curiosity, what is the retail price ranges in Colorado right now for
Oh my
rosin
goodness.
card?
Yeah, it's a pretty broad range. I think we're seeing a range of probably around between 30 even up to $60. There's some high-end brands here like Green Dot has a really exceptional product and they command a pretty high price point, but that's a pretty wide range, I would say, in that tier.
Okay. Yeah, you see a similar price points here in California.
Hmm.
And there is quite a large range, right? I mean, some of the
Right.
distillate cards are quite cheap, or value oriented, I guess is the proper nomenclature there.
Yeah, that's how we say.
Yes, the value brand.
Uh-huh.
Um, Great. So, as we're talking about pricing in Colorado versus California, I know you're based in Colorado, but you said you've experimented in some other markets.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and in my extensive experience that you described earlier, I've worked in the California market for many years and several other markets across the country as well.
yeah. So one of the questions that I get a lot, from people that are not inside the industry is, what people see is like an occasional headline here and there, right, in the
Hmm.
local newspaper. And they're always curious about market trends. There was just an article maybe last week, in SF Gate that the cannabis market is collapsing in California and Michigan has overtaken it, which are, kind of sensational headlines. But what are you seeing so far in 2024 in terms of market trends inside of your market? And is there very like a material variability between Denver, Boulder, Colorado Springs, even within the state?
Sure, and Colorado was similarly highlighted recently in Wall Street Journal and Politico about the struggles that our market is experiencing. We're going through a contraction and consolidation phase as well. It's an interesting question around the sort of micro regions within the state. Colorado Springs is a medical only market. They do not permit recreational cannabis sales in that county. So definitely a different shopper there. They have different product configurations, different price points. They have different purchasing limits. So you take a different approach to that market versus Boulder, which can be very seasonal. It's home to the University of Colorado. So when students are there, you tend to see more of a value mindset. When the students aren't there, that area is more affluent. And so you see a shift back towards some of the higher end stuff. And then the shoppers in Boulder do tend to be a little bit more ingredient conscious as well. So they're looking for the more full spectrum types of products. But yeah, we do see differences in each of those regions. And then there are retail chains that have a presence in all of those markets, and then there are retailers that are individually in each of those. So you really have to know, even within the state, what's happening in each of those areas.
Yeah, and I kind of want to segue into pricing strategy a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, and curious as to how just overall economic factors have weighed in on that in terms of obviously some things have gotten a lot more expensive in the last couple of years, just overall. And you've seen a lot of people raise prices in different categories. How has that affected your pricing strategy? Have you found that you have to give better deals, or I don't know how you work with your retailers in terms of discounts or
Yeah.
offers?
Yeah, I think, in general, I'd say our pricing strategy, like I said earlier, you really never want to be in the middle of the pack. That's the dead zone. So I think keeping abreast of the pricing fluctuations and making sure that you're not in that dead zone, especially with a product like distillate vapor cartridges, which can be very much a commodity product, and shoppers really do shop on that price point. So we try to be roughly in the lower end of each price tier. Like I said earlier, the top shelf, bottom shelf, and well, as a general philosophy. Certainly, we have seen with the inflationary conditions across the country over the last couple of years, we've seen the share of the consumer's wallet that we can command shrink and shrink and shrink. That led us to launch a value offering at the end of 2022 to complement our higher price offerings. So we have made some adjustments there. We're not really seeing, I think you do see some fluctuation on the flower end of the market in Colorado. That's been holding steady. Distillate prices, we actually have had some activity in the Colorado market. Our regulator sent out a notice in April. It turned out some of the marijuana product manufacturers were working outside of the system and bringing in distillate that was converted from CBD from hemp.
Oh,
So we saw it was a puzzle for us for a while because we saw input prices going down dramatically, and it really took us by surprise because we didn't see an overall decline in the amount of biomass supply that was available in the market, but pricing went down significantly. And then when the regulator made this announcement in April, sure enough, prices have come back up. So there was a legal supply coming into the market that depressed the input prices. So we saw some margin expansion during that time, but it's difficult to pass price increases through to the consumer, especially, as I said, when the overall economic condition for the country is inflationary.
yeah, great. Well, thanks for that. I always like to when I get in a conversation with someone in another market, just ask some general questions for my own curiosity.
Yeah,
Uh,
pleasure.
let's dive into the topic that was as advertised, which is brand development, and the funnel and all of that. So, I think you said you have a couple slides that we could walk
Sure.
through of how you approach things, and really we want to go through the whole life cycle of like the brand creation itself, right? The
Yeah.
brand development, and then how you drive that to consumers actually making purchases and then repeat purchases, ideally.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let me say, for one thing, I want to just be super clear. Brand creation is an elaborate art. It was so amazing the time that I had at Willie's Reserve. I worked with Elizabeth Hogan there, who led brand, and she is amazing. This is a superpower. And I don't even come close to being able to do what she does. So my efforts at brand creation are more rudimentary. I see some white space and an opportunity, and kind of go after that in sort of a less refined way. But I think what I observed that happened at Willie's, involved working with focus groups, bringing in consumers, testing different variations and configurations on the brand to see what resonated with them after developing a deep understanding of consumer purchase behavior and that is really a robust methodology. What I've really done at SphereX is be opportunistic. When I came in late 2022, as I said, there was a lot that was happening in the economy around inflation, and consumer spending was really tight. And so we saw an opportunity at that value tier. The products that were being offered in the market at that tier, when we talked to retailers, they were seeing a lot of returns. The hardware quality was really low. They were getting leaks and breakages. And then we saw just generally the quality of the distillate was inferior relative to other products. We have a large scale operation with a lot of automation, and we had a lot of economies of scale with our hardware providers. So we were able to take those resources and leverage them into a very, for its tier, a really good quality product overall in terms of the distillate, the flavors, and the hardware, and offered at a really aggressive price point. And we had a project, code name was Project X, and then this is before Elon took over Twitter, so I will say that as the caveat, but we wound up calling it X Vapes. So there really wasn't a lot of again, I put Elizabeth Hogan in a category over here, and what I did with X Vapes was knuckle dragging compared to that, but we were opportunistic in the creation of the brand. What I can talk more about is the customer journey, and that's something that I've had a lot of experience with over decades in different categories, as you shared at the beginning of it. So if you want me to segue into that, I can talk about the customer journey and the funnel, if
Yeah,
that makes sense. Cool.
yeah. I'll talk about the funnel all day. So
Okay, I have a funnel to show you. So why don't we just? I
you
can
gotta
pull
have a
that.
funnel in your slide somewhere if it's a marketing
Heck,
strategy.
heck yeah. Well, I don't want to disappoint. So here's my funnel. And this is something that you see, I think, in many industries and many categories. And it's important to understand. And I'll make what I think is the most important distinction when it comes to cannabis here in a minute. But at the top of the funnel, really your overall goal here is for the shoppers to know that the brand exists, and the tactics that you employ to achieve that goal are through advertising, social media, and through public relations, getting into the media. Next step is the goal of having, once the shoppers know that that brand exists, creating an intention in their mind to go out and buy that brand. And here the tactics might be through an email program, text programs, or live activations have been very successful, as I've seen in the cannabis industry. And again, something that we did very successfully at Willie's. I had another colleague there, Nicole Kennebeck, who just again is a wizard in those. So I've definitely borrowed a lot from what I learned from her. But then moving down the funnel, we have to sell the product first to the retailers. We have to convince them to put the product on the shelf. So there are different tactics there, different marketing assets required. We have then B2B sales collateral that we use to convince the retailers that we're going to bring shoppers into their store and help them drive sell-through once the products are on the shelf. So we have programs there, email and call programs, as well as B2B live events where cannabis buyers come together and we have an opportunity to meet with them and demonstrate the product. The
But
next day,
before,
sure. Go
yeah,
ahead,
before
Jake.
you move
Yeah.
on, I want to dig in a little bit there.
Yeah.
On the awareness side, have you been able to, so there's a couple of ways to sell in, obviously to distribution. One is, you have a sales team, you go in, you give them product demos, you convince the retailers that they should carry your product. Have you run campaigns where you've been able to get enough awareness that the consumer starts asking about the product prior to the retailer agreeing to take it, like the actual pull from the consumer side?
Yeah, definitely. And that's the dream, right? And it's hard work to make that happen. But yeah, that's something that we're starting to have some success with at Theorex, and certainly we had a lot of success with that at Willie's. But that's the dream. But
That's the dream.
that's
Yeah.
really hard to do.
Yeah. Do you have any examples of strategies or tactics where you've seen even limited success with that? Because I'm sure anyone listening would love to hear about a success story there.
Yeah, sure. What we try to do currently with SphereX, and this will tie into the next stage of the funnel as well. We're doing a lot of live events. Now, these are not consumption events. In Colorado, public consumption is not legal. It's very challenging to have consumption events that are within the rules of the law. So that's not what we do. But we do have other events. We've had skate parties at roller skating rinks, bowling alleys. We've participated in larger cannabis themed events. But as an example, every year there's a Mile High 420 celebration in Civic Center Park, and one of our retail partners, Jars Cannabis,
Mhm.
produces this event. They've got a dispensary that's a few blocks away from the park. So we have a booth at the event, but then in addition to that, we hire out pedicabs, bicycle cabs, and position them on the outskirts of the park. And so when people come to our booth in the park, we can't give them product, we can't sell them product, but we give them a little poker chip with our logo on it and tell them to take it to the pedicab driver, and then they take the shopper to the dispensary. The shopper buys product at the dispensary, and then the pedicab driver takes them back to the park. So getting really tactical, boots on the ground. That's a quick example of something that we do.
That's clever. I like that. Yeah, it's a little easier here in California with the consumption. There's a brand here that does hash holes. So they're,
Sure.
infused. But they did an event at the Woods in West Hollywood, Woody Harrelson's spot. And they made a hash hole with a pound of flour and 28 grams of rosin inside of it. It was like this big.
That
Uh,
sounds epic.
it made for some great social media awareness for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Love that.
Yeah. Okay, I'll let you continue on down the funnel.
Sure. As I said, once the product's on the shelf, the job's not done. Our job is really to keep it selling through. And the cannabis industry is like no other. In let's say, someone is going to buy bread. You're not going to go to the supermarket and at checkout, the cashier is not going to go, "Oh, I see that bread that you're buying there. You got to buy this other brand of bread. This is a much better brand of bread." But that's exactly what happens at the point of sale at every cannabis retailer. Shoppers come in unsure of what they're purchasing, and the budtender is the one that directs them to a suggestion, or like I just described, you can go top of the funnel and get someone to know your brand exists, get them to intend to buy the brand,
Mhm.
get the brand on the shelf, get them walking in the door and going, "Hey, I want to buy SphereX." And if the bud tender goes, "I really think you should buy this vapor cartridge over here," almost always that shopper is going to go, "Oh, well, you must know what you're talking about. I'm going to buy the one you recommend." So this is really crucial for us. This education phase in the funnel, we really have to be aligned with the bud tender. So we really do a lot to form authentic connections with the bud tenders. We do a lot of work to educate them on the differences between our product and the competitive product. We try to show as much love as we can. We go into the stores, we bring them swag, we bring them food, just to let them know that we're thinking about them. And then these events that I mentioned earlier, we invite bud tenders, even from retailers that we're not currently in. We'll invite bud tenders from those retailers to come to these events because, again, we're trying to show love, we're trying to build community, we're trying to form connections with the bud tenders so that we at least have a fighting chance at the point of sale. So that I think is one thing, especially for people who are coming to work in the cannabis industry from other consumer product categories, that is very surprising to have that dynamic when, in every other category, someone goes in the store with a purchase intent in mind. 9 times out of 10, they're going to leave that store with the product as long as it's in stock. Definitely not the case in the cannabis industry.
Yeah, and on that note, obviously the Budtender has a huge amount of sway for in-person sales. And I know Colorado's kind of only recently been able to do online, like actual like purchase online, right? It's been you
Right.
kind of order and then go pick up. Um, do you have data around the behavior of the customer journey from so the difference between when someone walks in versus placing an online order? I don't know how many, of your products are being ordered online right now.
Yeah, just pretty much in its infancy. We've just started to be able to do that. We're really just starting to measure. Really hard to measure that in the real life example where someone's walking into a store. So there's no data there, but I always just assume the worst. And I think that's a safe assumption just to make sure that we're continuously focused on winning the hearts and minds of the bud tenders that we work with.
Okay, great.
Yeah. And then, closing out here, so merchandising is something that we really also have a lot of focus and intention on so that when the shopper comes into the store, there's signage, there's product displays, there's educational assets, there's assets at the point of sale that promote the brand in a good way. And then finally, if we do all the other things right, we get to that bottom end of the funnel where the shopper actually does buy the product. And so we also support that with vendor days where we'll send a brand ambassador into the store and offer either a product discount or a gift with purchase if they buy one of our products. So there's promotional offers where the brand ambassador has a chance to get them to buy the product. And then the work really starts before all this and making sure that we have high quality products that are going to deliver on the promise that we're making to our customers with the brand. Because if they go home with one of our cartridges and it leaks or it breaks or it clogs or it tastes funky, then they'll never buy the product again because they have too many other alternatives. So we do a lot of work on the R&D side when we're bringing the products to market to make sure that we are going to have a product that's aligned with the customer's expectation.
Yeah, I know that's a big pillar for you, which is the actual quality of the hardware that you're
Yeah.
delivering. How do you convey that on packaging if someone's just, picking your product up, looking at it, no one's talking to them. You don't have a lot of opportunity there other than to say generally kind of the flavor and the weight and your branding. Have you been able to
Yeah.
figure out a way to effectively communicate that your hardware is better than the hardware next to it?
Yeah, it is a little bit inverted, right? Because as I said, when we recognize the opportunity for this value offering, it's because we went secret shopping and asked the bud tender, "Hey, what about that one?" And they'll say, "Yeah, that's the lowest price one, but I got to be honest with you, 25% of those come back, so save your receipt." So the bud tenders know because
Okay.
they'll get returns. If the cartridge is malfunctioning, the shopper will complain, they'll bring it back and they'll know. So it's a little bit of the inverse. It's really hard to communicate that. At one point or another, I've seen different cartridge manufacturers have their logos on packaging. The problem is the cartridge manufacturers do nothing to educate consumers about their technology. So it could say XYZ hardware on it, and no one's ever told the consumer that that matters, so they don't know that it matters. So those don't really work out that well. But again, Budtender education wins the day in our experience.
And your product is using like a standard cart, threaded cart.
Yeah, we have a couple different formats. The primary formats are 510 standard threaded, and we also have a couple of models that are all in ones that have the battery integrated with the cartridge.
A little bit of a tangent, but I'm sure you've at least thought about some of the other formats that are out there. Like, there's companies that have their own proprietary format, or there's a couple that are somewhat interchangeable.
Yeah,
Uh, is the Obviously you've decided to go with standard, either it's an all-in-one or it's a 510 threaded. Um, did you do some research on that and then just decide to go with something that was standard? Just kind of curious about the thinking there.
yeah. The not I wouldn't say necessarily a ton of data driven research, but the data is pretty apparent. The 510 thread is one. You definitely have pod systems that are out there. Like Stizzy has their own proprietary one, Pax has their own proprietary one, and folks find those appealing. I think once people invest in that format, they tend to be loyal to that format. But on a relative basis, it's small compared to the amount of 510 threaded cartridges that are out there. So it's just, fish where the fish are is my overriding philosophy. If that's where the consumer is expressing overall preference, that's where I'm going to be.
Yeah, fair enough. Um, I want to dig in a little bit more on the awareness and demand generation step, because that's a big chasm to cross, right? To get people
It
from one
is.
side to the other. And I
Yeah.
know you've got some things listed here on demand generation, like emails and text programs, et
Yeah.
cetera. But those things assume that you've now got some sort of contact with the consumer and they've
Right.
opted in somehow. Um, Maybe you could talk a little bit about how you've seen success in moving someone from awareness, whether it is a digital ad or a billboard or a demo day or whatever it is, and moving them from awareness to actual consideration, which is the other phrase that is sometimes used for that portion of the funnel, right?
Sure. Yeah. A lot of what we really try to do is partner with our retailers. And so we ask them, what works for you? What programs are effective at getting shoppers to come into your store? That's what they really want from us, because if they've already got somebody in their loyalty program, that shopper is going to come in there anyway. And
Mhm.
we're not adding a whole lot of value because they could sell them something else instead of our product anyway. So they want us to bring people into the store. That's really the job of the brand, is to bring net new customers in. So we have used billboards effectively when the retail, if there's a billboard that is near a retailer, we'll co-brand with that retailer. And in some cases, we can also display pricing or a promotional offer on those. So those have been very effective for those retail partners because the retail partner already has an alignment with that. We did a test with one of the magazines that's widely distributed to dispensaries in Colorado. Is called Rooster Magazine, and I'm going to maybe date myself, but there's an old adage. It's called Wanamaker's Curse. Henry Wanamaker, who is the creator of Woolworth Stores, is famous for saying, "I know that 50% of my advertising budget is wasted, but I don't know what 50%." And so what we try to do, so I carry that mindset into magazine advertising. But we did a test with Rooster where we actually promoted one of our events. And so we put a QR code in the ad for people to RSVP to one of our big parties. And so we were able to measure the engagement with the magazine ad in that way. because we didn't have another way really to see that through to an actual product purchase. But we were very pleased with the amount of response that we got from that engagement. So we have invested more in advertising with Rooster. And again, it was a retailer initially that had said that they've had good success with people coming in to stores based on advertising in that publication. And so we followed their lead. So those are a couple of examples where we've tried to be thoughtful, tried to test the program, and we've seen pretty good results from it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Have you experimented at all with digital out of home? So we run so we do obviously, we do digital marketing, we run in any, but at this point it's anything with a screen on it. So we'll do campaigns in a radius around the given retail location, whether it's for the retailer or it's co-marketing campaign trying to drive consumers and do sell through through advertising. But those can be pretty interesting because there's actually a lot of screens out there in the world now. Everything from gas stations to elevators to even in the bathroom at restaurants and bars. Have you done any digital out of home yet?
We've done for billboards, yeah, not in the small screen sense. In Colorado, we can't advertise in restaurants and bars, and that's where most of those types of that type of inventory lives. But we have done digital billboards for large scale billboards, roadside billboards.
And did you ever have you done QR codes on your out of home or just in the print?
We haven't yet, but I love the idea. It's definitely something we're testing.
Yeah, there's always a little bit of a thing with billboards because it's like you don't necessarily want to encourage people to like take their phone out while they're driving,
Yeah,
right? So that's you want to be careful of that. It works a little better when you're in venues where people aren't driving,
yeah,
um, or at the gas station where they're not driving at that very second. Uh,
right.
but yeah, QR codes are a good way to measure engagement for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Great. Now, when we were talking earlier, you were talking about your brand as a fighter brand.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and close down the slide
Oh
here
yeah, sure.
if we're good on the funnel. Yeah, great.
Yeah. So, when the brand category that I hear the most when people talk about these categories is like the challenger brand, right? So
Mhm.
like Pepsi is a challenger brand, Coca-Cola, for example, and there's many books and lots of videos all about being a challenger brand, but maybe you could talk about what a fighter brand is.
Sure. So a couple of examples. I think car companies are really good ones. The airlines can be as well. But so, for example, in the 80s and early 90s, Japanese car manufacturers were seen as inferior quality relative to European auto manufacturers, and luxury car brands tended to be exclusively European, with the exception of, let's say, Cadillac and Lincoln in the United States. And so initially, the first Japanese automaker to launch a higher end brand was Honda with the Acura brand. And so now you see that also being the case with Toyota and Lexus, with with Nissan and Infiniti, and then in the European market, you have Volkswagen, Audi, and Porsche, all effectively being the same company. And so the idea behind a fighter brand is to address an opportunity in a segment of the market that you're not able to address with your current brand as one objective. The other is to be disruptive and to take market share in a segment that seems like it's ripe for more competition. So, and generally, that's the idea. You have an established brand that is in one segment of the market, and then the same company introduces another brand at a different segment in the market because they see an opportunity there.
And that's an example, like what is it?
X Vapes.
It is X Vapes.
That's our value brand. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's something you introduced in kind of in the same category where you're going to go after different segment of the market, but it's still your brand. And to that, I think most people know that Acura and Honda are the same thing, or the same company. They're not the same thing. Um, but does your customer base, are they aware that Sphere X and X Vapes are the same company, or do you run those things separately?
Yeah, that's a really important question. So let's talk about risks first of all. One of the risks of this strategy is cannibalizing the incumbent brand that's already in the market. So for us, as I said a couple of times now, we are very intentional about product quality. So there's some important quality distinctions between X Vapes and the Sphere X brand. Typically the distillate potency in X vapes is less than the potency in the Sphere X brand, and the amount of terpenes that we dilute the distillate with is higher in Sphere X versus X vapes. So Sphere X is going to be more potent and more flavorful. X vapes is going to be slightly less potent and slightly less flavorful. So there is a quality distinction. So customers are getting more when they pay more. They're getting value at every level. So I just want to make that distinction first. So that being said, what we saw in the market as the opportunity was the brands that were already at that value tier. What we heard from our retail partners was there's inferior quality hardware where we get 25% of the units returned in some cases, and the taste, the flavor isn't as good, the distillate isn't as refined. And so we said, oh, well, those are all problems that we know how to solve. And so the hardware is very high quality for X vapes, as well, less than 1% fail rate for that hardware. And it has a good flavor, even though it's not as flavorful as Spirit. So we make the retailers are aware. Obviously, they're buying both brands from us, and they really appreciate the quality of service that we provide to them in that way. But we don't we don't inform consumers that they're being produced by the same company. Now, a Budtender may do that, and definitely we try to be diligent, but some of the retailers do list it on a menu as X Vapes by Spherex. When we see that, we ask them to make changes because, to the greatest extent possible, the conversation we hope to avoid is a shopper going into a store saying, "I'd like to buy Spherex," and the Budtender saying, "Well, this is a less expensive product, and it's virtually the same thing." So we try to avoid that happening.
Yeah.
And then in terms of the marketing programs, completely separate. The personas are very different. We have different shopper personas for each of the brands. The activations that we do are very different. So we really don't show up in the same way with both brands anywhere.
Yeah, can you share a little bit about your consumer archetypes or personas that each one of those product lines is targeted towards, and how you came up with those?
Yeah, definitely. So how we came up with them really was on the ground research, talking to retailers, as well as looking at the demographic information we have from our social media channels. Steerex tends to skew slightly more female, slightly higher income levels, and slightly higher educational levels. And so the vibe there is more, I wouldn't say bougie, but we're
But you could
getting
say
up
bougie.
getting up to that. I mean, it's not again, it's not our premium tier, which is where the rosin is at, but it's sort of affordable luxury, is the guess what I would characterize that. Whereas X Vapes is definitely going to skew much more significantly a male shopper. This is a shopper that's consuming cannabis more frequently, daily or throughout the day in many cases. slightly lower income level, slightly lower education level, and interests are going to be more. For SpearX, we're doing roller skate parties. X Vapes, we're doing like car show and skateboarding events. So different vibes.
And have you had any early on notable kind of misses in terms of like you have the skate party, or do you have any examples that you're willing to share where you thought maybe you had the right persona for the right activation and then you learned afterwards like the next version there were some things you were going to change?
Oh, I love that question.
We can circle back to that one towards the end if you want to think about that some more.
No, yeah. We've had a pretty good run. I have an amazing team at Spearx. I really have only brought two people on since I've been there, and everybody else has been there for a long time. So I tell people all the time, it's the best team that I could hope for. So we haven't had a ton of missteps, I would say. But let me think on that. I'm
All
I'm
right.
a big fan of being self-critical in a good way, but I'll see if something comes to mind if I remember.
Well, I've definitely learned the most in my career from the mistakes that I've made. So,
Yeah,
I try,
I
try
mean,
to make fewer of them, but still do.
well, I think a general one. I mean, it's not really persona related, but in vapor cartridges, there's been a trend from initially it was half gram cartridges to full gram cartridges, and now we're seeing larger format and 2 and 4 gram cartridges. And so I think that's where I've seen mistakes made both at Spearx and other brands that I've worked with where over ordering hardware and being stuck with hardware that then isn't something that consumers are interested in. So I've seen that happen a couple times, and that's definitely been an issue. But yeah, so far, like I was actually a little concerned when we did our first roller skate party. I had the idea and thought, well, I don't know how this is going to go. I think I was kind of trying to tap into a retro vibe I thought was going to land well, and then just kind of crossed our fingers. And then I knew it was going to be okay though when we cracked open the door and people were lining up with their own roller skates.
There you go.
So I knew we were going to be okay, but I was nervous when we did our first one of those that was actually going to be a thing. But yeah, but so far pretty good with Spirit. Yeah.
Did you get, I'm guessing you got some pretty good earned social out of that event.
Oh yeah, yeah,
And
definitely.
how do you measure that? There's lots of different ways that people measure that. Like, for let's take that one for example, the roller skate party. People
Yeah.
love to take videos of themselves on roller skates, so I'm sure there was lots of that going on. How did you measure the actual net effect for you as a brand?
Yeah, I love that question. I mean, I tend not to be, I know this might break your heart with Media Gel. I tend not to be overly data driven. We're just trying to keep up with sales right now. We're very fortunate that we've had a lot of success. So I don't really spend a lot of time in the data. My experience with data in the cannabis industry is going to be really noisy and it's hard to find a solid trend. But I think, we have a really good social media team. They do track our mentions and we do see a spike around those when we have these kinds of events. We look for those things, but it's mostly just to kind of reassure that we're on the right path. I don't do a lot of. It doesn't keep me awake at night at this point. There are plenty of other things that keep me awake, but
Fair
but
enough.
that's not the main one at the moment.
Yeah, well, that's as you alluded to, that is the world that I live in, is lots and lots of data. So
Yeah, yeah.
in every direction. We are coming up on the hour here. We've got one question here that we can address, and anyone else that's at least in the Zoom version of this, I know we're on multiple platforms. There's a Q&A. If you have some questions for Ryan, please do answer them. We've got one here though from Mary, who is actually a trademark attorney that works a lot with cannabis brands, and what she's asking about is making sure that before you launch your brand, that it is actually something you can do. Case in
Hmm.
point, X Vapes, although X Vapes is fine because it's its own phrase, obviously Twitter's now X, but um, How did you manage that process? Do you go through a patent search? It is important. I've seen people do this before, and they get their heart set on some brand, and then they didn't even look at like inside of their own state that something like that already exists.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We did a search. We did have a clever retailer come out with Z vapes not long after we launched X vapes in a direct affront to us. So yeah, I get the risk there. We did look around the state for the most part because that's where we're in. And there are vapor hardware manufacturers out there that are called X vapes. So we do see that, but not a exact one-to-one competitor. But yeah, it's intellectual property around cannabis is very complex. I applaud the attorney. They're in a good spot because there's lots of business there, and it's really hard to navigate those waters. So my advice would be is lawyer up, get an intellectual property attorney, and seek their advice.
Yeah, and that was Mary Shapiro at evoke.law. If anyone is interested in researching a brand prior to launching it. Another thing I've seen, and I've actually seen some brands pivot somewhat elegantly from this. I've seen a lot of people that were doing effectively like a knockoff of an existing brand. Um, and uh, and that's obviously not a sustainable. If you get any level of success, that's not going to work out, right? Like McDonald's, whatever it is, or they would come up with like puns, variations of other existing brands. And so I've seen less of that. Do you see much of that still going on in Colorado?
Oh, sure. We've got Starbuds dispensaries is all over the state. Yeah, it's still a thing for sure.
All right. Um, Great. Okay, we've got another question here from Jeff. Balasa, how do you approach packaging innovation, and what is your perspective on how it links to overall experience of the brand, especially when you are positioning yourself as a value player?
Yeah, it's challenging, especially in our category where shoppers are so price sensitive. I mean, we really have to find the lowest cost packaging as possible, and unfortunately, that means less sustainable environmentally. So we're using Mylar packages. We go out to bid for as low as prices as we can get, and then we do the small things like make sure they have punch holes so they can work on a flat wall with forks and gusseted bottoms so they'll stand up in a display. But apart from that, we don't get too innovative. We want them to look nice and fit the tier that we're in. But it's challenging in our category. In flower, I think you can do get more creative and certainly even in the edible category, we've seen brands like Wild have some success, largely based on not the product itself, but really interesting geodesic packaging. So those things matter, but for our segment, shoppers are really focused on price, and so we have to be very price oriented when it comes to packaging.
Have you had some internal debates on, let's say there's a version of the packaging that is for whatever reason more aesthetically pleasing or cooler for some reason, but it costs, 10 cents more than the other version. Is there ever a debate internally about, well, we probably can sell more of them if we have just a little bit less margin, but slightly cooler packaging? Is that a conversation that has been had?
No, I mean, not in this company. In other companies, definitely. I have had those conversations for sure. I was consulting with a luxury edible brand for several months, and the packaging was crucial because it was a top tier, differentiated product that was really trying to establish itself in that sort of Louis Vuitton level of a product offering. And there was a lot of attention to detail for every element. So it absolutely has its place. we don't have we know what we are at Spirit. So there's a lot of alignment. It's not really an argument. You know, we do have a lot of thought and consideration around the how the packaging looks and even the texture of it, but not a lot of debate. We're all on the same page. We know what we're doing.
Well, that's good. You don't have to waste time arguing about it then.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've definitely bought a few, I would say on the edible side, some products where a combination of not just the packaging, but the form factor, whereas like I don't know that I'm gonna buy this again because
Yeah.
it's like a gummy smashed between two pieces of plastic and it's like sticky and it definitely I think that was I don't know that product's around anymore. Maybe that's why.
Well, I mean, I don't think I'm going to hurt any feelings. They're the number one brand in most markets, but you see that with the wild products. You know, they have. I'll make a controversial statement here. The geodesic packaging we hear from retailers all the time. They love it because you can get really creative from a merchandising perspective. You open up the inner container and everything's stuck together in one big glob. So, I mean,
Yeah.
it's exactly what you're describing.
Yeah. The other one that I've seen that I'm not like a power consumer. I have a relatively low threshold, but the other ones I've seen where you buy gummies and it just comes in one big strip, right?
Mm-hmm.
I guess there are people that will eat 100 milligrams at a time, but I'm not one of them. I
Sure.
prefer to have them in 5 or 10 milligram sizes.
Yeah.
Much easier to work with.
Yeah, well, Space Gems in California is my favorite edible brand, and they have like a tape and it's segmented, so it's easy to tear those pieces off, and I think that's clever, but you could throw a whole gob in your mouth and it doesn't stick together otherwise.
Yeah, that does work. Yeah, Space Gems is a good product.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I don't think we have any other questions here, and we're wrapping up on the hour. Are there any other kind of parting thoughts, or maybe you've remembered an activation that didn't go as well as you wanted it to? Um, but I guess
I haven't thought of the activations normally have been pretty good. I tend to be pretty thoughtful about those things, we haven't had too many misses there, but I'll send a note if one comes to mind.
all right, yeah, please do. Um, oh yeah, so I guess on my earlier comment is, you know, do you have any sort of parting comments on general approach that we haven't already covered, or maybe a question I didn't ask you that you wanted to get into?
No, I think I said it a few times as we were talking through the funnel. I mean, I have so much appreciation for the bud tenders. Be present with them, know what they care about, and win the hearts and minds there in an authentic way, not in a self-serving way. They'll know if you're full of crap. So be real and make sure that they know what you're up to and make sure that you're going to live up to their expectations. If you don't, then you have almost no chance.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because the focus of your marketing and your consumer journey is different than the things that Media Gel is normally focusing on, right? Because we're generally doing digital advertising and we're generally driving people to do online orders. I mean, we also can measure foot traffic and offline orders, but primarily we're pushing people through for delivery or pickup or some form of that, and it works very different in different states.
Right.
Um, and it's there's a different thought process there too, right? Because there's pros and cons to it. Obviously, you don't have a bud tender that's going to potentially sway the decision making process. But you've been able to create those relationships with the bud tenders, so that becomes a strong point for you rather than a weak point. And I
That's
applaud
right.
you at figuring that out and being effective at implementing it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Well, we're right here on the dot at noon here, at least in California. Ryan Hunter, thank you for your time. I think you had a lot of good wisdom to share with everyone. If anyone wants to reach out to you, maybe you can let people know how they could get a hold of you if they, have questions.
Yeah, just hit me on LinkedIn and try not to show up in the other message box. That's an easy way to get me. I'm on LinkedIn.
All right, fair enough. Well, thank you, everyone. Again, this is Jake Litke. I'm the CEO at MediaGel, and this has been a illuminating edition of Cannabis Market Live with Ryan Hunter.
Jake, thanks so much for having me on.
Absolutely. Thank you. Bye, everyone.